Today's session's around invoicing, trying to get the most out of NextMinute in that regard. We'll go over creating invoices for fixed price jobs, charge up jobs, and then also how to do a bit of formatting and make it look the way you want it to look. And then we'll dig into some more advanced stuff. And towards the end, Mark will jump on and talk about email deliverability. And I'll also talk a little bit about that as well, because it's something we deal with all the time. But to kick off, let me just share my screen.
As Duncan's sharing his screen, we might have a few questions coming our way at the end as well. I know everybody's going to be using different email systems and stuff like that, so feel free to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A panel, which is in the middle of your screen down the bottom. We may come back to you after the session. I'll be posting in a couple of links with some help files, but you're more than welcome to come back to us after the session and we'll help you out one-on-one, because everyone's probably going to have a slightly different setup. So we won't all waste everybody's time, going through everybody.
Yeah, cool. Cool. That makes sense to me. And then, Mark, if you could, just because I'm useless at it, keep an eye on the chat and feel free to interrupt me if someone has a question along the way.
Yep, no
Um,
problem.
cool. All right. So my screen's up there. Everyone can see that now. Um, what I've got here is a job called 60 Broadway. The job already has a quote on it. It already has some charges on it as well that have come in from timesheets and also from supplier invoices. I got to this stage because that's really at this point we'll be talking about actually doing the invoicing. To start off, I'll start with a fixed price job and what I'd recommend on how to invoice for that. So you can either go directly to invoices over here and then go add and go using quote, which will then let you select a quote that you want to invoice for. Or another way of getting to kind of the same goal is if you go to quotes and go to the quote that you want to make an invoice for to begin with, you can open it up first. And the reason I recommend this sometimes is if there's already an invoice that's been done, you'll be able to see that on the quote as well. So it's actually kind of nice to go to the quote first and see what we're doing. Then from here, you can either select the items that you want to invoice for. So for example, let's say it was just stage one. We would select stage one, then go to more up the top and go create invoice from quote. Now, because we selected some items already, we can choose the selected items option, which would invoice for just the things we've selected. If we hadn't selected them, we'd have to do all items. I'm going to go selected for this example. And then also, this is a formatting question. So it's saying, do you want to format the invoice to be the same as the quote, keeping the sections individual, as in stage one and stage two? Or do you want to just combine them into one? So for this one, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go combine into one. And then you've got the option of doing a full amount or part amount. So again, this is just based on the items I've selected. So if I did full, it would do everything in stage one. If I did part, it would be a percentage, progress payment on that part. So for this example, I'll do part amount again. Then it will tell you what you're invoicing for. So the total of the selected items is this much. And you can either choose to take a percentage of the remaining or an invoice or just a flat number. So for example, if I wanted to, I could come in here and say I want to do 20%, and then it will calculate for me what that 20% is. And we can click OK and hit save. Now what that'll do is it'll pull in those items and it will take 20% of them and create the invoice that we're after. As you can see here, I'll just go into the preview real quick because I'm going to talk about some of the areas that we can then adjust. So the very top bit, this top header, is all sort of locked in stone. Like that doesn't change. You've then got where it says thank you for the opportunity, the header of the invoice that you can adjust and have templates for. You've then got the body of the invoice, this stuff in here. And then at the very bottom, the footer and payment details as well. So those you can adjust as well. So to edit them, you can either click into the header and then just start typing away. Or the same with the footer, you can just click into it and adjust it. I'll show you where the templates live towards the end, but if you did have a template, you'd be able to select down here and choose between your different templates, and it will update what we're seeing here. Cool. Again, this was just a 20% invoice for stage one. Um, so there's still more on that quote to invoice for. So if I go out of here, you'll now be able to see on the quote itself that this much has been invoiced for, this much is remaining. And that's just on those items. If you look at the very bottom, it also tells you for the whole quote separately how much has been invoiced as well. And anyone that doesn't have, sorry, as you can see here, these haven't been touched because there's no invoice amount. Now, when we create another invoice from a quote, it's going to know, sorry, I'll go back into the quote. It's going to know that this much has been invoiced already. So it won't let me, it will kind of prevent you from over invoicing, right? So if I go create invoice from quote, go all items this time, and I'll choose to keep individual sections and go full amount, it'll know that 10 to 20% of stage one was already invoiced for. So we're now left with this much. And then stage two is for this much. Cool. The other thing with invoices, obviously you create them in here. Most people use Xero, MYOB. So once you've created them, you can then sync them to whichever platform you like. You just hit the sync button at the very top there, and that will send it across to Xero MYOB. It'll also lock the invoice and it will give it an invoice number. So right now it says draft invoice. I'm going to sync it. I have a feeling this won't work because I haven't used my integration in a while. It might give me an error, but we'll give it a go. Yeah, there we go. This just means I haven't connected to Xero in quite a while. But what if it did sync, it would then have an invoice number. This would be locked into a read-only mode, and you'd be able to then send it to a customer from NextMinute as well. So when you go send, you also choose who you're sending it to. And then you've got another template. Again, I'll show you guys at the end where this lives, so you can adjust it. But this is a template. You can also switch between them down here at the bottom by clicking on the template you want to switch to. Don't worry about this. This is obviously me doing some testing. But yeah, you've got lots of options on what you send. The messages that you then send are also saved to the job in the message log. So you can always come back and see, yeah, what was sent, who it was sent to, and all that kind of stuff. If I go back to this job now, and even though the quote on this job has been fully invoiced, we still have some charges that we want to invoice for separately. Maybe this portion of the job was charge up, right? The path for invoicing for charge up is a little bit different. You'd go from the job to charges, then you'd go into sections view. It lets you view the charges in a little bit more detail. So for example, I can see this is a supplier invoice I've got on the job. These two up here, these three are all timesheet entries from admin user, right? So similar to quote, you can choose what you want to invoice for. So I could just choose just the supplier invoice, for example, and then go to more and go create invoice from charges and choose selected items. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to just do all of them, but just showing that you can do both. The same questions we had before are going to come up. So do you want to do individual sections, which is separating it out by these three different areas or four different sections here, all combined into one? So this really comes down to how detailed you want to be. If you want to show your timesheets by day, I think separate sections is really good. If you want to just have it organized in one area, then one section is better. You can then do full or partial. Again, this is just a preference. Oh, sorry, not a preference. This is a progress payment. So I'm going to do full. Most of the time for charge up, it's going to be full. And then I'm going to hit save again. So this time it pulls the charges into the invoice itself. You can see them all in here. And again, the same formatting rules from before. You've got the header, you've got the footer. You've also got your sync with Xero that sends a copy to Xero and locks this in here. And the other thing that we haven't touched on is the print options. So if I preview this right now, and this applies to fixed price as well, you can see it's showing the full breakdown, quantity, units, total amount. A lot of people would prefer to just show a little bit less. So if we go into print options and also preview and send and print options, you can choose a section and then choose to hide all line items right here. You can also apply that to this section or all sections and then click done. So now if I preview it, it's going to look a little bit different. You'll be able to see, instead of it being, a bunch of items, we've just got the section name showing and then a total. So a little bit tidier. Another common way people like to format their invoices is kind of labor and materials, two different sections. You can get there really quickly with a little bit of formatting. So the way you do that is first off, I just rename this first section labor. And then if you go up to the top and go selected items, select all labor, and then go selected items and go move to another section. You can then choose to just move all labor to the labor area. You'll see it will move these three. Then if you deselect labor, you'll just want to delete these two other areas. And while they're still selected, we can just go selected items and hit delete. And then in this case, you could do the same exact thing for material. There's only one, so I could just rename this to materials. But if you're doing the same thing, it'd be select all material items, selected items, move to another section, and then delete the sections you don't need. So that formatting can, be done very quickly. It takes you a couple seconds, and you then be left with something more tidy with labor and materials and some totals. A couple other ways people do like to show it is maybe you do want to have a bit more of a breakdown for the labor. So if we go into preview and send and print options again and go labor, and maybe you don't want to hide all the items, and you instead want to show maybe the name. Maybe you want to show the username, so user right here, or the name of the rate, which is this one, the description, the quantity, the units, the cell. But instead of it being admin user 3 times, when it's the same user, you might want to just combine it up here. So combine duplicate line items. So if that's not ticked, it'll have 3 different entries. If it is ticked, it'll just be 1 entry per user. So if I do it this way and then hit apply, sorry, done, and then apply. I go into preview. We'll now see it should say admin user, build a rate admin user 24 hours, right? Instead of 3 entries of 8, let's merge them all into one. So really, there's a bunch of different ways you can format your invoicing, and my best recommendation is just talk to us to get to the point that you're happy. Um, Not everything's possible, but quite a lot is. The one thing that's also worth noting though is the formatting in NextMinute doesn't carry over to Xero. If this was synced to Xero, there'd be another copy of the invoice in Xero, but it would just be just the line items. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't take advantage of our print settings, for example. And that's just because it's meant to be a, bookkeeper accountant version of the invoice as opposed to a customer facing version. Cool. The other thing I just want to show is kind of the flow-on effect of invoicing, right? So invoices are used in a lot of our reporting. So if I go into reports and back costing just really quickly, it's not a session on back costing, but I always end up coming back here. You better see that any invoices on the job go into this invoiced column and also then reflected as a percentage. So in this case, it was 100%, but then we also invoiced from some charges, so now we're at 105%. That invoice number is really critical because we use that to work out your profit. And the equation that's happening here is essentially your invoice number, 29,000, minus your 3,000 equals your 25.9 thousand over here. And then it calculates a margin off that too. So that's why from a reporting side, invoicing is really critical. Obviously, it's about getting paid though as well. One last kind of more advanced tip I'll leave for invoicing is creating it from a template. So if you wanted to, using the charges as an example, if I go back to my invoice for charges, and if I just delete this and then leave those two, that's fine. Instead of creating an invoice straight from charges, you might have a very specific way you want to do your invoicing. So you could go to add and use a pre-built template to achieve this. Now, what a template does is sort of pre-formats the invoice a bit. I will create a quick, simple one, really quick to show you how they work, and I'll also show you where all the templates are. So on the left, under admin, up here under templates, this is where any of the formatting templates live. So for invoices, this would be your invoice header, your invoice footer, your cover page, and T's and C's. At the very bottom, we've also got pre-built sales item templates. Now they're used for quoting, but they can also be used for invoicing as well. So you could go in here and click add and create an invoicing template. And I'll just call it invoicing labor and material. And maybe the template just has a labor section and a material section, right? Could be a lot more complicated. You could also have a description in here. You could, include a lot more than that. But again, keeping it simple, this is a good way to do it. Then back on that job, if we go to the job and go invoices, you can go add and go using pre-built template. Click on the invoicing labor and material, hit save, and it will just create an invoice with that saved kind of formatting ready to go. Then from here, you can work backwards to get the charges into the invoice. So if you go into these dots, triple dots, and go import, you can go from charges over here. And then from the screen, you can select the charges you want to invoice for. Again, in this case, if we're doing labor and material, what you'd do is you'd go select all labor and you'd click OK. Go selected, combine into one, full amount. And what that'll do is it'll pull in all the labor charges and put them under the labor section. Then we could do the same for material. So if I just go import from charges, select the material, click OK, selected items, combine into one, full amount, and we're done. So, and obviously that there's only 4 items here, but even if there was 100, it'd be the same sort of process, right? And then you've just got your print settings that you adjust to make it look the way you want it to look. These can be set to a default. So for example, if you did want to hide all, you just have set as default ticked, and then you wouldn't have to adjust this every time. And then you're left with an invoice that looks like this. And I know I did zoom by a little bit there, but once you get the hang of it, it's really quick, really snappy. It's just finding the way that works for you. Another quick advanced tip, and it's actually slipping my mind. It's really just understanding the sync with Xero part. So when you do hit that, think of syncing with Xero as like a final save because it will lock the invoice, and you don't want to have to then make changes to it, because to do that you then have to unsync in Xero, make changes, and then resync in Xero, which gives it a new invoice number. So it's all about trying to avoid that where possible. The other thing that we didn't really cover off is payments for invoices, and I don't really like talking about it because normally that's something you do in Xero anyway. If you do it in Xero, it then syncs back into NextMinute and would mark it as paid. But you can also manually do it in here by going to more and going add payment up the top and choose an amount, where it came from, that sort of stuff, and hit save. And that will add a payment, which can also sync back into Xero as well. So it goes both ways. Now, one very, very quick last minute tip before I hand over to Mark, or before we take some questions potentially, is the third way of making invoices, which is just by creating them from a blank invoice. Now, a lot of the time people like to do it from quotes or from charges because that just makes sense. But if you're ever just making an invoice and you need to do it quick, doing something like a quick add or a blank invoice is perfectly fine. You can always go quick add, go next, put it under a different type. So let's say it was all labor. Type in invoice or whatever and how much you want to invoice for, and then hit save. And that will just very quickly generate you a one-line invoice. And at the end of the day, in terms of reporting, as long as it's on the same job, it's going to count towards that job's report for invoicing. So it's all going to be linked up anyway. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. It's nice and simple. It's just the other ways are good for other reasons. So for example, if you do it from charges, it ticks off the charges as invoiced as you go. As you can see by going into charges, these are all been marked as invoiced because we create an invoice from them. And then if you create it from the quote, it does the same thing, kind of ticking it off from the quote to say it's been invoiced. But if you create it on the job, at the end of the day, as long as you're getting paid, that's all that really matters. It just won't show up on the quote unless you create it from the quote. Cool. I think we've gone over probably enough on terms of invoicing. Do you want to do questions now, Mark, before we kick into the other stuff, or?
Yeah, it's probably good to do the anything on the now. I haven't got anything in the Q&A as yet. So if anyone has any questions now, or raise your hand virtually, and I'll turn your mic on. Otherwise, I'll go through my bit of mail, and then we can come and do a final Q&A. So I'll give you 20 seconds or so just to raise your hand or type something in if you do have any questions.
We need some sort of dramatic, like clock ticking noise or something that you can play, you
I
know?
mean, you could do one just through the microphone.
Do I
Oh,
I don't
Ingrid.
know.
Hi, Ingrid. Do you want me to turn your mic on? Oh, sorry, no mic. Okay. If you've got a question, Ingrid, do you want to type it in there and we'll address it now, or we can do it a bit later? What I'll do, oh, here we go. All right, Duncan. So it's how do you add items to an invoice after it has been created?
Yeah, cool. Good question. So that's where that import function would sort of come in handy. Just to go over that, if you open up an invoice that already exists, even if it's this draft one here, and then click on these little triple dots here, you can go import, and then either from charges, if it's a cost on the job, or from a quote, if it's from an existing quote. And then, so if I click on from, I'll do from charges. I don't know if anything's going to come up because we already invoiced for it all, but let's try anyway. It should, yeah, there's no charges to invoice for because we've already done them all, but this screen would show you all the charges that have yet to be invoiced, and you can just select them and then pull them in by clicking OK at the top. And then the other way is manually as well. So you can always, there's nothing stopping you from just adding an item in. Let's say if it wasn't a charge on the job, but you needed to invoice for it, and for whatever reason you're not tracking it as a cost, you can just chuck it in there as well. Awesome. No worries, Ingrid.
Cool. All right. We haven't had anything else come through, so what I might do is just in and share my screen, and then if anyone has any questions afterwards, just about any of it, just let us know. Plus, there is a survey that comes out afterwards asking a few questions if you want us to get in touch with you as well. So, from my, oh, hold on, we do have one more here, Duncan. Just quickly, is there a way to put through a part payment that just reduces the final amount and not part of each line item?
No, not really. So the way we would typically operate is yeah, when you take a percentage like 10% or something of the whole quote, if of the total amount, it would just take 10% of the quote and then leave the 90% that's remaining. So you can do it across the whole quote, but it would be per item. It wouldn't be like a lump sum, yeah, figure, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, again, if you did manually create an invoice by going add and doing a blank invoice or something like that, that that technically does take 10% of the job without affecting the quote at all. And it's still linked to the job, but yeah, your best bet would probably be doing a 90%, sorry, a 10% across the whole quote. I'm just going to delete these invoices and do that really quick just to show you what I mean. Because then it's all linked together. So if I went in here and go add using quote, select the invoice, select the quote, click OK. All items, formatting doesn't really matter, but part amount, and you're saying 10% of everything, which would be the 2.77. So you could either manually create an invoice for 2,700 and on the job, and then technically that would show as 10% of the job has been invoiced for, and then you can create another invoice for the remaining 90% later. or you can create it from a quote, which will do this, where it'll essentially take 10% of every item. That's what this is, and then give you a total at the bottom. Now you can format this so it's just one line, very easily. I could just move, just to show you what I mean, I could click on these and go move to another section, move them to stage one, delete this previous stage, change this to deposit.
Or progress payment, right?
Yeah, progress payment one, whatever you want to call it. And then because it's all under one section and I've got my print settings to hide all the items, it should just show as deposit and then one number. So it doesn't have to show as 10% of everything, but the way we operate it does take that percentage across all the items to get you that progress payment. Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, more than happy to hop on another call with you later on to really dig into it to make sure it works for you.
Cool. Cheers, Duncan. All right, so I'm going to get on to this the topic of actually sending the emails out. And I'll be using a few acronyms and terms that probably won't make any sense, but don't worry about it. It's just a kind of, you just need to know that they're there, and what we need to do with them in order to be able to get your emails to your clients. So I'll just share my screen for a sec. So the way it works is we have within our system, you have emails that get sent out via the user accounts, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Duncan, as well. So in this system I've set up, you can see that it's my name plus something else plus, and at the end is after the @ symbol, you got nextminute.com. And that's a domain that we obviously own and we have control over it. And because we have control over it, we're allowed to put some more authority to it, and it's less likely to get picked up as spam. We do get a lot of support inquiries about emails that are going to clients and they're possibly going to spam or they're not being delivered at all. Now, most of the time that's going to happen because either the email that our customers are using is a free one. So if you think of Hotmail or Gmail or something that came free with your domain name, if you have a domain name, you have, and we have no control over how that is seen by the rest of the internet. So let's say you have a Gmail account and someone at some point has clicked, I think that's spam. Well, that's going to be tied to your account from then on, or it just might be a new account. And you don't have the ability to tell the rest of the internet that don't worry about it. We're legit, we're a business, and we can send it out. So what we advise is to have your own domain, which is the bit after this @ symbol, and then set up a few records on that in order to tell the internet that yes, it's safe and secure, and please, deliver it without being marked as spam. And I'm just going to take you through really quickly how that looks and the benefit of having your own domain. And then any questions or if you need any assistance following this, get hold of us and we'll actually help you out through your own system, because although there are two main ones, there's the Google Workspaces and then there's Office 365. There's also a bunch of other ones out there. And we can help you, but there's no point going through each of them today. So I'll just bring this up. Right. So yeah, so things are going to your client spam folder. And the other point about having a a free email is, and we all do it, you start a business and you get a Gmail account and you just keep hold of that. It doesn't scale with your business. You're locked into one account. Let's say it was, Bob's Construction at gmail.com. What happens when you want to have an account, an account's email address, or let's say a foreman or something like that? You're basically either tied into the one account with a shared password, or you're having to create a whole bunch of really random email addresses. So at some point in a business, you really want to say, okay, we own this business, and Bob's Builders will say we're going to purchase the domain, get an email address, and that will scale with you as you go. Plus, you have ownership of it. So There's a lot of benefits to having your own email address, and one of them is that you retain your own data. You have control over everything. You also you look more professional. If your client picks up an invoice and it's from a Gmail or a Hotmail or whatever other account, there's always a perception that is this a legit business? How big are they? It's this perception of being pretty small, right? Um, Your email is probably the one point of contact that you have with your clients the most, apart from your phone. So it is a critical business tool, and it's worth investing in. It's not expensive. First thing you need to do, and you may have already got this, if you've got a website, you probably have this already, is you need to register a domain. So you want to come up with something and make it local. So let's have the Bob's Builders. It might be bobsbuilders.com.au or .co.nz or something like that. And these things are about $35 a year. So they're not very expensive. And you can hold that brand, right? That actually helps you own your own brand as well, which is really cool. And there's a bunch of different services that you can buy domains through. There's Crazy Domains and GoDaddy, which are global ones, and then there's Venture IP Australia, all the way through to Free Parking in New Zealand. You just got to source it, find a cheap one that offers pretty good protection. They're all pretty much the same, and purchase the domain. Right, so next you want to get yourself a standalone email service. A lot of the domain registrars that you have, which I was talking about before, let's say it's GoDaddy, they do it. They'll say, hey, do you want some free email accounts as well? And you might be tempted to do that, but that's going to lock you in with that provider. It's going to be locked to your domain, and they also don't have the weight behind them to protect the domain like something like Google or Microsoft has. You have less control over it. So my suggestion would be, and the sort of industry standard would be to get one of those two big ones and utilize that. You have a choice, and we'll put them to here. Look, you don't have to do these ones, but it's a good idea. For about $10 a month per account, you may only need one. Would be either Google Workspaces or Microsoft 365. And they're about $10 a month, but it doesn't just give you email. It's also going to give you all the other stuff that you would use across your business. Let's say, especially if you're dealing with, engineers or draftspeople or whatever, you might get a whole bunch of files sent to you in Excel format or Word format. That might lead you to go more towards the Microsoft side, because that $10 a month is going to give you all of those platforms. It's going to give you Excel, it's going to give you Word, it's going to get you file storage plus that email that we're talking about. If you don't get all those files and you just want to keep it nice and clean, you might want to go towards the Google ecosystem. They're much of a muchness. Everything's in the cloud these days, but the Microsoft one does give you the ability to open those commonly used files that you might have, especially around the Excel sort of thing for pricing. So that'd be the second step, right? You got your domain, then you sign up for one of these platforms. I hope you like my guy here. Now comes the next step, okay? And this is the step that a lot of people will get to, and then they've just left it, right? You say, I've got my domain, I've got my email, I'm sweet, and off we go. But we are actually missing one vital thing, and that is telling the internet that your email is safe. So there's a few records that you would put in. I'm just going to exit out this and I'll show you what it looks like. Now I'll do it in a second. In order to point your domain at your new email service, whether it's Microsoft or Google, you have these things called MX records. I'll show you what they look like, but it's pretty simple. It's just you'll either get a tech person to do it or yourself if you know how to do it. Plus, we do have help files. But you're going to set up, basically point your domain to, let's say, Microsoft. Now, the next three are sort of unknown ones, but they're really important, especially this next one. It's called an SPF. Don't worry, it's an acronym. That is basically telling the internet who can send emails from you in your so let's say first off, it'll be, if you're on Microsoft, you're going to say, look, Microsoft platform can send all my emails, so Outlook can do it. But let's say you want NextMinute to send it for you because your email account will be associated with us. We actually have a record that you can put into NextMinute or into your domain, and that's going to say, look, NextMinute's safe, we trust them, and that's going to prevent all of those spam things happening. And I'll show you how that works in a second. The next two are just an extra layer of security. There's this DKIM, which is like call a Dickum, and that is basically you think of it as seal. It goes onto it. Yes, this is super trusted. It's a big piece of code that you copy and paste from either Microsoft or Google. It's a little bit hidden in behind those platforms, but we can definitely help you out with that. And then there's the D mark, and all that does is say if something comes up and there's a security breach or something looks a bit dodgy, what should we do with that? And it's usually to say block it and send me an email and tell me that something went wrong. That last one is not 100% necessary, but the other ones I think are. And I'll show you how these work. Okay, so I showed you before that we've got this this domain name nextminute.com, but I'll use a different example. I've got here this CPD consortium domain that I just got tucked away, and I'm sitting now within my domain where I registered my domain, okay? And there's all of these records, and it looks like spaghetti. I mean, who knows what this does, right? So, but what I'll show you is these are these MX records. And these are pointed at Google. So Google does this all for you. It tells you what to put in. So there's 4 or 5 of them. You only need one, but there's 4 or 5. That's your MX. That says send my email from my domain to Google, right? And then we have the 3 that I just mentioned. There's this one here. It's called the SPF. In order to do that, you will go either add a new text record or you'll edit the one that's already in here. And please come to us. We can definitely help you with this. You can see here it's got this stuff and then it's got include, which means please add Google and send all email through it. And everything that is to Google, please trust it. But we're going to need to add something to this, and that's in order to send email through the NextMinute system. You can come to our help file, our help file here, and I'll post this out. In fact, why don't I do this right now? I'll send it through the chat. Just no, I won't. I'll do it later. I'll actually do it later. Okay, so we've said in order to send things through NextMinute, add this little bit here, this include amazonses.com. So I'll do that. So I'm going to copy this, come over to my domain, and I'll just chuck it in here next to Google because we want Google to send it for us, and we also want NextMinute to send it for us. And we click confirm, and we're done. And that's it. And that step is going to pretty much prevent your emails going to spam across both from your email. So let's say you're signed in through Outlook or you're signing through Gmail through your business account. And it's going to prevent that spamming, and it's also going to prevent all those invoices and quotes that you're sending through NextMinute from going to your client spam as well. The next layer is to actually put this DKIM, but like I said, that's quite often buried in behind the scenes. It's not 100% required, but it will add maybe an extra 10-20% to the likelihood for your emails not to go to spam. So I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, one last thing is in order to grow your business, and then coming back to that whole scattered how many email addresses you have, for the security and the growth of your business, being able to create separate accounts is going to let you do that. So let's say you could bring on a new foreman. You could have a separate account for that foreman that you can actually cut off at some point, or you could transfer it to someone else, but you're not sharing a password, the main password to your business email account to more than one person. It's really quite important. And you might want to have an account, or at the start, you may go, we only need one account, we only need one email address, and it might be, I don't know, if you're the person running it, if it was me, it might be Mark at NextMinute, and it might be accounts, and it might be sales, and it might be quotes, but they're all pointing to the same place. And you can do that within the system as well. And that's pretty much it. So reasonably complicated, but at the same time, 3 or 4 steps, and you can get to that goal of preventing spam and also being able to grow your business a lot quicker. So, is there any is there any questions on that aren't specifically about your user case? Because following this webinar, there in the survey, there's a question that says, "Do you need help setting up your email or setting up the email specifically around those SPF records?" And if you do tick that box, we will get back in touch with you, and we'll help you set it up. Another way is just to come back to us as well at any time, and we'll help you out. We can actually do a screen share and guide you through whatever custom system you have. Anything to add on to that, Duncan?
No, no, pretty much I was going to say what you just said, which is it's all just a bit of gibberish to a lot of people. So we're
Yeah.
more than happy to hop on a call. And I did it with a bloke in somewhere in Western Australia last night. I say last night because he said, "You want to meet at 3?" And I thought, sure, 3, New Zealand, it's probably like 1. He's somewhere where 3 o'clock was like at 7 o'clock New Zealand time or something. I don't know. I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, no, I jumped on a call with him and took us about 2 or 3 minutes and we had it up and running. So when you know what to copy and paste and put in the right place, it's all good and easy. So yeah, just don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it.